welcome everybody. I am Jukka Rahkonen. I am working for National Land Survey of Finland, and I have been using several OSGeo softwares for about 20 years now. And I am also a program steering committee member in GDAL, map server and GeoServer programs. And this presentation is about bathymetry. That is something that I do not do for my work. This is a hobby project. I will talk a little bit about the reality, something that exists in the ground, and then about the data that tries to describe that reality, something about open data, open software, open knowledge, and also the results I achieved in my hobby project and what I learned from this project. Finland is said to be a land of 1,000 lakes. Lakes gather more than 9% of the total area of Finland. And the big image is around from here. There are also more accurate numbers. Finland has 57,000 lakes which are larger than 1 hectare, and about 100,000 more that are less than 1 hectare. And in our basic maps by area, 80% of the lakes have depth contours. And depth contours, they have been acquired during a period of about 150 years. And charting began in 1850s, and charting was needed because inland lakes were used for transporting goods and people by that time, and there was a hope to make navigation safer, and also lakes were used for floating logs to sawmills and paper mills. And until 1990s, the most common sounding method was to use a rope and a plummet. So plumps, and like a Captain Cook or them, and full fathom 5. And in Finland it was easy actually to make soundings during the winter time, because the surveyors could walk on the ice and make holes in the ice and drop the plummet through the hole. And it's not surprising that the density of the point data gathered this way is not so high. But new technologies were introduced in 1990s, and since that the bathymetric data are collected with echo sounders and GPS positioning. And that kind of data suits well for digital processing. It's kind of a point cloud, but with some special nature that we will soon see. But while the technology was getting better, the need for doing depth measurements almost disappeared, because lakes are no more used for transporting goods or people. And renewing all those old manually made soundings is too expensive. So that kind of work actually is not done anymore. And at the moment, the situation is that we have digital point cloud-like data from about 2,000 lakes. So it's not so big portion of the total number of lakes. But what is good is that most part of that digital data is available as open data. So, yeah, in my hobby project, I was interested in point data. We have contours from the 80% of the area of lakes, but they are not so not so fun to work with for my mind. And who collects depth data now? There are two agencies. Finnish Transport and Communications Agency is charting those lakes which still have official waterways for ships and boats. And Finnish Environment Institute is charting the rest of the lakes for making hydrological research. And both these agencies have open data. That is good, but they are delivering data in different formats. And Traficom has a web coverage service that is sending GeoTIFF files, and the Environment Institute gives depth data as point shape files. The Traficom data looks like this. It almost looks like a DEM, digital elevation model, but actually it is point data. As you can see here, these are individual points. They do not interpolate between the measured points. Yeah, and here, what looks like a DEM, it is actually that there are depth measurements from every square meter on those areas. So that data is very detailed. And the data from Environmental Institute looks like this. So they have been driving with the motorboat and collected data just beneath the boat with echo sounder. So it gains this kind of lines which are actually points. And I was in this project, I was using the data from Syke mostly. And the Syke data is point data. I place it into GeoPackage, and data is simple, and there is only a lake ID, what is the depth of the point, and geometry. Then I had to choose a software to use and how to interpolate. Because the nature of this echo-sounded data, all interpolation algorithms do not work so well because the data is dense along the lines, but sparse in between the lines. From literature, I found that tension splines are often used for this kind of data, and other common alternative is to use thin, triangulate, and filter and smooth the data in a clever way. But I played with the tension splines, and for example, grass is supporting tension splines, but I used generic mapping tools, GMT, that is an open source project. The main place is at the University of Hawaii, and for what I know, it is not so commonly used in Europe, and also it is mostly used for bathymetric data. Then we are rather close to get starting at. I had lake IDs, so I could combine the points, depth points, to the boundary of a lake. The boundary of a lake is important for interpolation because it's a so-called break line. It means that the interpolation is stopped at the border. So interpolation happens only within the lake area. Otherwise, it would give some odd curves to the end result. And then why I decided to use generic mapping tools and not grass. First reason was that I found very good examples from the net. And another that GMT was totally new for me, and I was curious to test how it works. And then it has a weird synopsis to use. It is all command line, whole lot of switches, and this is the switches for the GMT surface algorithm. In addition, GMT is also using pipelines, so you could pipe several of that kind of arguments and functions together. Then I mentioned GDAL in the title of the presentation. I use GDAL for converting raster and vector formats, handling a coordinate system, masking the images in some following phases when I combined these digital elevation models of lakes into existing digital elevation model of the above ground. And then, for example, editing no data to values that were needed for other software that I tried. And actually GMT is using GDAL internally, so it's impossible to use GMT without GDAL. And GDAL is something that I knew already, so using GDAL tools was a natural choice for me. And then into action, how to create a digital elevation model from, in this case, point data is CSV. Just few parameters, the source data, the extent of the output, resolution of the output, what file is making the break line, and where to store the result. Okay, this is a simplified example. It would be better to use some more switches, but this is still a working example and actually creates quite a nice result still. This is not actually DEM, this is a shadowed version of DEM. And another example of using GMT is to put some color to the digital elevation model. The function is grid image, then it takes something in, and then it makes some default shading. It takes a color map from this from a text file that is called seafloor, and then it takes us the input and output and some GDAL options about what kind of geotiff is the result. Here are a few examples. I made a script that created digital elevation models and these colored versions for 1,900 Finnish lakes. And those DEM files are available from my own server. And then to the lessons that were learned. First of all, it is good that the State Institute published their open data. But because there were two institutes dealing with the deaf data in Finland, it really would be better if they could use a common format. And also that open data is a good start, but institutes might consider to publish also the methods because they do create DEMs for their own use, because they need first to have a DEM that they can use, they can create contour lines later, and contour lines are still the main result what the institutes publish for mapping agencies and so on. So they could consider to give something like this for my mind. But because there are open source software and there are very helpful communities around these softwares, it is possible to get quite nice results without being an expert on bathymetrical data. And if you are not satisfied what I have reached as a result, you can just edit the formulas and try yourself and improve the result. So I think that all you need is open data, open software, and also open knowledge is very important. Thank you. Have you any questions?
You mentioned that you use the digital elevation model so that you combined it with
yes.
the model. Was it for visualization purposes, or did you predict something, for example, if there was a steep hill?
I played with visualization. I made a 3D model with QGIS with that, and actually it looked pretty nice, that too. Are there other questions?
I don't know. So is that point data available for like bigger lakes, or and about the traffic data, for which lakes is it available for?
The Traficom data is available for a large part of Saimaa, that is the biggest lake in Finland. And they were planning to publish data from Oulujärvi, but then I'm not sure what is the situation right now. But large parts of Saimaa are covered. And the Syke data, that is all over Finland, very sparse data, and actually typically from smallish lakes. Okay, everybody seems to be happy. Thank you very much.